Hello, everyone, and welcome to Franchise by Nguyen Phi Vân. And I'm very excited today to have the first guest ever on my show. And this is a special guest, the first guest, but also a very interesting person, an industry leader in the franchising industry in Vietnam. Meet Patricia Marques. And she's been with Starbucks Vietnam for 12 years. And right now she is the Business Development Director for Vietnam of Maxim's group. Hello, Patricia, and thanks for joining us on the show. You've been in Vietnam for a while, right?
Yes, for more than a while. Yes.
For more than a while. For how many years now?
14.
14 years. Oh my God.
14 years.
More than a
Yes.
decade in Vietnam. So you must know a lot about Vietnam as well. But for us to, for the audience actually to get to know you a bit more, maybe you would like to share, 3 very unique things about your Vietnam experience with the audience here.
Sure. Happy to do that. So hello, everybody. My name is Patricia Marques. I was born in Peru. So first thing to know about me, I was born in Lima, Peru. And I have been in Vietnam for the past 14 years in the coffee business. And I have been invited to this very interesting program, so I'm very happy to be here. 3 things about me. Number 1, I fail plenty of times.
Oh, wow.
And I recover. Life many times takes you in different, switches and turns and lefts and rights. So the second thing is I learn how to be flexible. And maybe the third thing that I have practiced quite a bit in Vietnam is to be nimble and adaptable. Because I think many times we just are too tight and we consider it to be a weakness if something changes and then we have to adapt. But in the last 14 years, I've learned that being nimble and adaptable has shown me that many times that opens the door to new opportunities and to very interesting growth. So there are 3 things: failure, switches and turns. So not your plan will almost never will go as you think it will go. And number 3, be nimble and adaptable.
Wow. Okay. I like what you said about flexibility, adaptability. And you've been heading Starbucks Vietnam for like 11 years before you get on this group position, right?
Yeah.
Did you have to be very flexible and adaptable for Starbucks as well during your time in leadership in Vietnam?
Definitely. Look, it's while I have been with the brand for over 24 years, the Vietnamese team was new to me. So each and every one brings newness to the group. So yes, I had to adapt. I had to adapt the very strict concept of the brand to a very different environment. So yeah, definitely, very much.
But then Patricia, I mean, in a franchise system, there are a lot of discipline and, processes and things that you have to stick to, very rigidly. How would you be able to be adaptable and flexible with a franchise system like that, especially when it's an iconic brand? And I know it's going to be quite difficult for us to actually making, new things or making changes every day.
So that's a very good question, because I think those are 2 very different subjects. One is, in my mind, if you are going to develop a license or a franchise, of a brand, definitely you have to stick to those brand requirements. No question about it. However, there are very different ways to, we say, to change a light bulb, right? There are very different ways to change a light bulb. At the end of the day, what we need to do is change the light bulb. Whether you use the right hand, the left hand, whether you use a ladder or you step on a chair, those are all methods at the end to change the light bulb. What is mandatory is that you change the light bulb. So be flexible and adaptable on the things that you can, so that the ones that you cannot will be less challenging for you.
Well, I like your approach of changing the light bulb. So I think that the audience will remember that that story as well. So having been with Starbucks for 11 years, what is, if I'm asking you one lesson that you have learned during these 11 years in Vietnam of growing Starbucks in Vietnam, what would that be?
So first is 12 years, but 11 years of celebration of opening stores, but I came when there was nothing. So I had to put the company together, I had to recruit, etc. The one learning from my 12 years running the company, I would say relationships are highly important. So I had a great relationship with the brand owner, which allowed me to have very candid conversations with them, right? By being able to be transparent, and because I had such a good relationship with them, it made things so much easier. I had a great relationship with my team here. So that also allowed me to share with them the challenges that we were presented with. And together, we found solutions. And definitely, I had a fantastic relationship with Maxim, my employer, the owner of the license. And that allowed me as well to have very honest conversations with them and be able to communicate even during the hardest of times, COVID, right? Via Zoom, how things were on the ground. So trust in relationships are the most important.
Trust and relationship. I like that. I think it applies for everything that we do in life, even
absolutely.
Not just in careers and jobs, right? Yeah. Let me zoom out of Starbucks and Maxim's and ask you about the industry in Vietnam. So you've been here long enough to see how the franchise industry in Vietnam has grown over the years. What are your takes on the development of the industry so far?
So I think franchising in Vietnam is at its infancy states, right? For several reasons. I mean, having a Vietnam Franchise Association is amazing. It's the big step.
Yeah.
But I think there are some very strong factors keeping us from moving very fast on franchising. And to me, one of those is the lack of thorough legislation, right? Implementation, and perhaps the understanding of how franchises work and are supposed to work for the benefit of the franchisee and the franchisor, right? This is a two-way street. And unless both parties are happy, it's like a marriage, right? The wife cannot be happiest person and the husband is super miserable. It doesn't work, right? So both parties have to be happy. And to me, that's what is missing.
But you know, you've been here for 14 years. You've had at Starbucks for 12, and then we have seen, you know, brands like KFC, Lotteria, McDonald's, all entering the markets already. How come the industry is not growing a lot faster than we would like it to be? Why do you think?
I think there are a few factors. Number one, and to me, the most important. So first of all, KFC, I think, is huge in Vietnam. I think KFC is an example of a successful franchise, right? But I also have to say that KFC is not franchising units. KFC is it's operating as a whole, as an organization. They're not franchising the units. Okay. So that's different. Yeah. But I think, in my mind, one of the most important items in the list when you want to franchise is you need to understand what you are signing up for. So, for example, let me give you an example. I love pizza, right? So I go out there and I try in Singapore a couple of pizzas. And then I go to Hong Kong and I love pizza. So, oh my God, this is the concept that I want to take to Vietnam. Many times we haven't done the job to see how much do Vietnamese love pizzas. Because once you are signed up for the franchise, it's too late to do the groundwork. Right? You know what I mean? So if you find out after 6 months that people in Vietnam really don't love the product that you do, oh my God, you're in trouble. And that's when disappointment and I would say even disillusion comes very quickly to both parties. So I think there is a misunderstanding of the relationship. A franchise or a license is a long-term relationship. It's like marriage. You are getting married, hopefully, for the long term.
Right. So everyone is still learning about relationship at the moment.
Yes. Yes. And I believe it's a matter of respect, right? So your license holder or your franchisor wants this, and this. Be very cautious, be very careful, and be very thorough on your due diligence to make sure that you agree on all of those. Because once you sign, it is too late to go back. You need to negotiate before you sign, not after.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So that's why the misunderstanding of the relationship, both commercial relationships and and the execution, the actual market development relationship.
Absolutely.
Have hindered the growth of the industry in Vietnam. Okay, so that's what we see in the past. What would you like to see in the future, and what do you think will happen in the future? Let's say in the next 3 years or 5 years, because everyone is basically saying that the franchise industry is growing quite rapidly at the moment. Worldwide, it's about 9-point-something%, you know, for the whole industry globally. Do you see that in Vietnam?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think there is a lack of trust. I think the franchisee doesn't see necessarily the benefit of signing an agreement and paying fees. And they probably think they can do exactly the same without paying fees. So why can I not just copy the concept, right? So I think there is an enormous underestimation of the brand value. Brands are enormous, right? Some brands, you don't need you don't even need to mention it. You just do a check and you know what brand I'm talking about, right? Or I just say, just do it, and you understand what I'm talking about. So brands have an enormous, enormous value and power in the consumer. And we should not underestimate that. So I think there is still probably a lack of sophistication, maybe, or a lack of strong knowledge of the brands that have an enormous umbrella over them that can just literally grow by themselves because they are so powerful. And so if the interested party thinks that they can just copy the product and make it their own and be successful, I think they're underestimating the power of the brands.
But then on the other side, there are quite a few very young local brands that are coming up, right? Young franchisors in Vietnam. They don't have history or the brand power like Starbucks or McDonald's or KFC. They are basically rising stars in the local industry. What then would help them to be able to develop their franchise system in Vietnam in the early stage, let's say after a few years or after 2-3 years of operations in Vietnam? What do you think?
So the most successful franchises are the ones who truly nail the ability to replicate. Okay, so for example, if you have a restaurant where the talent lays on the chef and not on your recipe, it is very difficult to replicate because there's only one chef, right? So the talent lies on the hands of that person, and that person can only be in one location. So you need to be very thorough on what is it that you're interested either in importing or exporting. Same to all those young Vietnamese that because they have one location and they're successful, they think they can go international. And that's not necessarily the case. I would say there is a lot of homework to be done, right? There is a legal aspect. There are international regulations. Maybe the product that you're selling, you're offering, or you're preparing is not allowed anywhere else in the world. So why do you want to franchise international? You're going to find that you run into walls everywhere. So there is a certain criteria that your product, whether it's F&B or retail or service, is one that is in demand overseas or internationally. The second is make sure you streamline your concept so that it can be translated into 17 different languages and the final product can be exactly the same. Make sure that your manuals, including your recipe book, your training manual, your recruiting manual, who are you looking for to represent each and every one of your locations? It doesn't matter where they are. You are the owner of the brand. So it is on your table to make sure you have a clear understanding. How are you going to hold your franchisees accountable for that?
If you look at the current state of franchising in Vietnam and look at the local franchise brands that you probably have come across, if I'm saying, okay, on the scale of 1 to 10, are they ready for franchising? What would be your take? What number would you give from that scale?
That's a very difficult question.
I know.
You're putting me on the spot. So I would say, as a business woman, I would say that there are many interesting concepts, but they are in the beginning stages. I don't know how many of the owners or CEOs want to truly do the groundwork and make sure that they're ready, instead of hurrying and putting the brand at risk of failure. You follow me?
Yeah.
It's more a personality thing than a brand thing. If I go out and I look at retail services and F&B, there are a few super interesting and many interesting. I have spoken to few owners / GMs or CEOs, and I think I have run into maybe 2 that say, oh, no, we're not ready. We're not ready. The rest, they think that they should have opened 50 already somewhere. Yes.
Okay.
And then many times I just ask very fundamental questions. Very fundamental questions, right? Compliance, for example, such a fundamental question. And they look at you like, what are you talking about? Or logistics, or governance.
Yeah.
So those are very important subjects. So yeah, I also believe that has a lot to do with the value of being Vietnamese. Vietnamese are so entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
I so envy of, I wish I was born Vietnamese. Because, yes, because Vietnamese have no shame. They are not embarrassed of failure. They are not embarrassed of running into problems. They just go back and start, go back and start, go back. So that's an advantage, right? Unfortunately, not all the brands have the strength to survive those trial and errors.
Thanks for being very straightforward. In that case, with that particular state of development of the local franchise brands at the moment, what would be the advice that you would give to the rising franchisors, Vietnamese franchisors, for them to be able to, embark on a sustainable journey of franchising?
Very good word, sustainable journey. I would say ask for help. Very few young, courageous and admirable entrepreneurs in Vietnam ask for help. Let me tell you, one of the things I was in a seminar, a conference not too long ago, and the MC asked, how many of you use advisors? Not one hand. How many of you use companies that can help you strengthen the brand? Not one hand. So I think that's what is missing. We are not experts on every area. You have to be willing to say, I'm good at this, but terrible at that. So I'm going to find somebody that can help me, and I will have to pay for that service.
If you are to give a further advice of, let's say, top 3 things that you should ask for advice immediately if you want to be sustainable in your franchising journey, what would be the 3 things that you would advise further to the franchisors?
Number 1, a franchise business is a long-term business. Everybody is thinking in 18 months, I'm going to sell this and I'm going to make my first million. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that. Those are the exceptions, not the rules. So if you start this, make sure that you are committed to the long term. Number 2, to run a sustainable business, you have to be aware that you are one person. You have to take care of yourself, meaning you have to take care of your health, your family, your life, your entertainment. You cannot work 24/7, 14 weeks in a row, because you will not be there to celebrate. And that's where I come to saying many times, you have to outsource help and you have to pay for it. And that's very important. And number 3, make sure you don't measure your success by how big is your bank account. Believe me when I tell you this. When you look back, you will see that your success is more related to how great your team is, where your team members are, where is your family? Are you leaving a legacy? And don't forget where you come from. That's it.
All right. Very good words of advice, and from somebody who has, done the journey and advising the young professionals and young franchisors of Vietnam. So thank you very much for being on the show today, Patricia. And I hope that we will have the occasions to actually get you on stage and share further, especially with the Vietnam Franchising and Licensing Network in the future.
Absolutely. I'd love that. Thank you for having me. Good luck to all of those entrepreneurs developing new concepts. All the best.
So there you go, everyone. A very interesting conversation with Patricia Marques today, right? I don't know about you, but I've heard some really good keywords from Patricia. I've heard about trust, heard about relationship that you have to really build in franchising. It's not just about the business. It's about how you actually build that relationship to help you further your brand in the future. I've heard about sustainability, and I would also listen to how she says we are quite young, quite in the infancy stage of franchising in Vietnam. And for local franchisors to be able to flourish in the future, then you would probably need more professional help from people who have been there and done that. So thank you very much for being on the show with us today. And I hope that you have learned something and would be able to apply something to your franchising journey in the future.